Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast. Joining me as co-host Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism between the two of us. We are now part of the Bleav network. Great to be there. Great to have you guys with us. Later in the show, Astros prospect Joey Loperfido gets the call. Framber's back. And can the Astros move Minute Maid to Mexico? But first, Stephen, the Texans, had kind of a boring draft, I guess. It was a snoozer from Trader Nick, especially after last year.
Yeah, if you compare it to last year with all the excitement of getting C.J. Stroud and then, all the wheeling and dealing to move up to get Will Anderson Jr. and the middle round draft pick trades he made, I guess it was kind of boring, Robert, when you think about it. But I also think that every draft is interesting in its own way. And a lot of it depends on the positions you're trying to fill. And, obviously if the Texans were, they were a playoff team last year. When you get to be a playoff team, I guess it becomes less interesting because you're obviously not drafting high up in the first round unless you make a trade. But yeah, it was really interesting that we're so used to the Texans having a first round pick that they didn't have one. You had to wait till the second day to find out what they were going to pick. But I think that, they met most of their needs with their early picks, except maybe for one. And we'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah, we're going to get more into the picks in a second. But the Texans weekend did not stay boring, unfortunately. How scary was it, Stephen, reading about Tank Dell getting shot?
Yeah, the first time I looked at that headline, my heart just about stopped. And what I can say, Robert, and there's nothing good you can really say about something like this, but there is some positive news that comes out of it. First and foremost, that nobody was killed, as far as I know. No one was killed in this shooting. They were just wounded. Second of all, that Tank Dell, yes, he was wounded, but he will make a full recovery, and he was released from the hospital, I believe it was the very next day. So talk about breathing a sigh of relief. And again, something like this, life trumps football any day of the week. And yes, we're very happy that Tank Dell will make a full recovery. We're just happy that he is still here among us, and that, his first priority, of course, is to fully recover and hopefully be back with the Texans when training camp starts.
Yeah, it's a weird last few years for Texans picks. Tank Dell, shot. DJ Horton, or was it? Yeah, it was Horton, I think.
Yeah.
Cancer. Mechie, cancer. I mean, it's like just this weird off the field stuff that you're just not expecting to deal with.
Yeah, you almost wonder, does somebody have a grudge against the Texans? Do the football gods have a grudge against the Texans? They tease them a little bit, make them a playoff team, but then they do these weird things to draft picks. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, but boy, I'm just so glad.
3 draft picks that also Quisenberry, Horton, and Mechie.
Yeah.
We've had 3 of them over the years. Just so that's a lot.
Yeah, and then of course you have Tank getting shot. So thankfully, it just wasn't more serious than it turned out to be.
Quick heads up for everybody out there listening, by the way. Tomorrow you're going to hear a new show with insiders who covered the Texans draft picks the last couple of years. They'll tell us about what they know about them. Haven't quite got an insider for every draft pick, but definitely the key guys. You're going to hear from some of the key guys that the Texans drafted, like experts in that area. So look forward to that if you're a fan. It's not the most exciting, but I didn't hate any of the Texans picks, and I'm not crazy excited for any of them either. It's just it's a little bit more in the middle. Mostly I'm just happy they addressed cornerback and safety in the first 3 picks. Yeah. Remember I mentioned that Lassiter and Bullock both excelled against elite college competition. The numbers that jump out at you. Lassiter only gave up 15 catches for 135 yards all last year. That's like a Noah Woods like week with Stroud last year. And that's what he gave up the whole year. And then Bullock had 9 interceptions over 3 seasons and 2 pick sixes. So those 2 stats just jump out at you with those 2 guys.
Yeah, and it sounds like Lassiter, and he was a name that I heard mentioned on several mock drafts as far as the Texans and who they might pick either as their first or second pick. One thing that jumped out at me about Lassiter is it sounds like he's got a bit of a personality. I'm sure you saw that he wore a chain on draft day that read Locksmith Lassiter, and when he was asked about it, he said he called himself the locksmith because he prides himself on having things on lock. Yeah, get it? But
yeah, and that's the same nickname that there was a move to try to anoint Jabari Smith.
Yeah,
locksmith because of his defense, but unfortunately
didn't happen.
Jabari's defense just isn't quite good enough to be called locksmith at this point. It's all right, but it's not that good.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, Robert, is he didn't allow a single touchdown in 2023. Opposing quarterbacks, they only completed 38.5% of the passes when he was targeted. And again, as you said, he played against elite competition because, well, he's from Georgia. So, you talk about, the SEC and all that sort of thing, he certainly got some good competition in him. Excitement is probably too strong a word because there's so much unknown about all these picks, Robert. I mean, all the scouts, of course, are going to tout them. The Texans are going to tout them. But until you get them on the field, you just don't know.
And I know some fans question drafting an offensive tackle in the third round. But, Stephen, you can't forget Titus is coming off a major injury.
Yep.
Tunsil was banged up all of last year. He has been banged up at points during his Texans career. Charlie Heck's not who I want to see out there if anything happens to those two guys. And we're talking about keeping Stroud upright. That's got to matter if you're a Texans fan.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think I even mentioned on this podcast, Robert, that wouldn't surprise me if the Texans, if maybe not their first 2 picks, but apparently they did go with the second pick of their second pick in the second round. Blake Fisher's the guy you're talking about, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. Of course, as you mentioned, thin at offensive tackle. Laramie Tunsil, he's been kind of banged up. Titus Howard, he just hasn't been that durable with the signing of Hecht, and then they got David Sharp in free agency. But you just can't have enough bodies at the offensive line position, considering what's been going on. And tackle one of the more important positions, as you said. And let's see, what is he? 6'5", 315 pounds. So he started at right tackle and left tackle. So he only had 1 game at left tackle, but he has done that. So it sounds like a guy that, they can at least put him tackle to tackle if they had to.
Yeah, he's most likely their swing tackle. I think he beats out Charlie Heck and takes the job there as long as he looks halfway. I mean, it's a second round pick. Charlie Heck is a guy that's just been kind of hanging around as a 4th round pick, or I think it was a few years ago.
Yeah, and someone else that he played with is Jared Patterson, the center/guard, the Texans, and he actually vouched for him in the pre-draft process. So he's at least familiar with somebody on the Texans.
Yeah, sort of mixed results from the Notre Dame guys with the Texans. I mean, we're definitely happy with Patterson so far. Not as much happy with Nick Martin, who I think was never the guy that we were hoping he would be at center. And then, Lewis Nix. Remember him? He was a 3rd round pick out of Notre Dame that never took a snap in a regular season game, if I remember correctly.
That's right. So, come on. It's no pressure. No pressure, Fisher. It's, step up and make your Notre Dame Fighting Irish proud. But in this case, the Texans really could use something like that.
Yeah, Will Fuller, I think, was a Dame or two.
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing about Fuller is, if he had just been healthy, he'd been great. I mean, his health was his big issue.
Exactly. Also, the 4th round pick, Cade Stover, got to talk about it because Caserio's got a huge man crush on him. He used words like elite and everything you'd want in a football player and more. Stephen, if he can improve his blocking, he could be the best 2-way tight end the Texans have drafted since Owen Daniels. But maybe that's not saying much because if you forgot, here's a list of some of the guys that they've drafted since Owen. Tegan Catoriano, Haley Waring, Jordan Akins, Jordan Thomas, CJ Fedorowicz, Ryan Griffin, Garrett Graham. Stop me when you want to throw up for a second.
Yeah, he can't do much worse than those guys, right? Apparently he is quite a pass catcher, does need to work on his blocking. But here's the good thing, Robert. He played 2 seasons with CJ Stroud at Ohio State. So they were both team captains. So CJ's very familiar with them. He had 5 touchdowns. I think he had 36 catches for 406 yards. So, he does have some pass catching ability. And at the very least, he certainly is going to add some depth to a position that really, really needs some depth behind Schultz.
Absolutely. I mean, Texans tight ends, it would be nice to have somebody that could block a little bit. And he's a big guy. He's not the best blocker yet, but he's still learning the position, and he's a big guy. So that's something to keep an eye on. More on him again in our show tomorrow. So keep an eye out. We'll talk to a former offensive lineman at Ohio State. That'll tell us a little bit about his blocking as well. Of the low round picks, Stephen, Louisville running back Jawar Jordan could be interesting in special teams with his return game. 2 kick returns for touchdowns. Maybe the new kick return rules help him a little bit. Stephen, the guy who's most likely a steal from some draft gurus in the low rounds, Auburn defensive tackle Marcus Harris. Zerline projected him in the 5th round, not the 7th round where they got him. He had 7 sacks last year as a tackle. Again, he's a tackle at Auburn with 7 sacks. That's pretty good. It's a player maybe too small for some defensive gurus out there, but might be perfect for D'Amico.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you were talking about Jordan. That's one of the things they mentioned is the new kickoff rules. It might be one of the reasons that they took a chance on him. If he could be, next in line as the 3rd down back, of course, depending on what happens with Dameon Pierce, He could go in on, say, a third down situation, things like that. And he's actually going to be 25 when the season begins, Robert. So he's a little bit older. I don't know if that's good, bad, or not. But he did rush for 1,128 yards, 181 carries, 13 touchdowns in his final season at Louisville. Then you were talking about the defensive tackle.
Right.
Yeah. So that is a need that I know the Texans would have liked to have addressed at the very, at the outset of the draft. With the first
they tried. They tried to get somebody.
Nick did admit that he made some phone calls, even on the first night, I think, to try to get something done. So, yeah, he may be a guy that's going to take a little time to develop. I don't know. You may not see him as a whole lot the first season, but you never know. I mean, he could round out into somebody that could eventually fill that need.
While I didn't hear a lot of excitement, Stephen, about the draft picks from, the Texans fans on social media, I mean, there was interest, and I feel like they, might have like, oh, this guy's kind of all right. This, there wasn't like jumping for joy that we've seen with some of the picks over the years about, oh, this guy, that's, everybody was excited, obviously, about getting Will Anderson last year, Stroud, even Tank Dell was a big deal because he was a local guy. But the thing that I noticed, Stephen, is while, you could say I'm a little disappointed that there's not these guys that I'm necessarily excited about, I didn't hear people saying, yeah, but they should have drafted this guy. There wasn't that one guy that everybody thought, oh, they missed out. At least I didn't notice it anyway.
No, I haven't heard anything like that either. And that's pretty unusual, Robert, because almost every year there's always someone that you jump in and say, man, why didn't you trade up to get this guy? Or, he was there when your pick came up. Why didn't you pick him? And I think a lot of it too is, winning does a lot of that. It kind of cures some of those things. Yeah, you're always going to have a naysayer. Even if you win the Super Bowl, there's always going to be somebody to criticize your free agent signings or draft picks. But yeah, I mean, I think the Texans addressed, as I said, most of the needs that they did. And we'll, of course, find out when training camp starts and regular season starts, who's going to make it, who's not, and who's going to jump out at you and surprise you, and who's going to do as expected.
Yeah, there was a couple of cornerbacks. I did hear people wanting them to get in the second round that just didn't last that far. And they were like, oh, we should have traded up. Well, but Caserio did try to trade up, just wasn't successful. I mean, I think he saw what was going on. There was that big run of cornerbacks before they did draft Lassiter, but he seems very confident in what Lassiter can do. So I just don't hear a lot of noise about, well, there was this guy picked 2 picks later and he was the guy, there's just not, I don't just,
it also depends on how deep the position is. As you said, the cornerback position was pretty deep. So, they have more than one guy on their board that they like. So if you don't get one guy, well, you go to the next guy. Lassiter, as I said, was a name that was mentioned as the primary cornerback that the Texans would choose in the mock draft. So I don't think they were that far off base. Now, if it was a very thin, number of players at that position, then you might have to see some more room for criticizing or trying to trade up. But yeah, it's not like Caserio didn't try to trade up, as we said.
Now, we were talking about some of the bad tight ends the Texans took over the years, and I was trying to think, what's going to be my transition from the Texans to the Astros? And so I went with this one, Stephen. Forrest Whitley is so snake bit that Benny Joprew feels sorry for him. Do you remember Joprew?
Yes, I do. I mean, how many times did he get injured?
Oh, he never set
he never saw the field.
Yeah, that was crazy. Second round pick, tight end, never saw the field, and Forrest Whitley just can't get out of his own way. My other option for the Texans to Astros transition is Jose Abreu, kind of like the Astros signed Ed Reed to a 3-year contract.
Yeah, I'd say so. Although, how much did Ed Reed even get on the field? He did briefly, right?
Oh, yeah, Ed
he
Reed played. It was just,
but he didn't last the season. I don't think he didn't even last one season. But yeah, I think that's a pretty close resemblance. Now, the thing about Forrest Whitley, Forrest Whitley does have one thing on Joprew, and that is he did see one game of big league action, so he just barely eked it out over Joprew. But either one of those transitions would work, Robert. So Jose Abreu getting, of course, optioned not to AAA, not to AA, not even to high A, but to rookie league level ball. And obviously, what they do there is it's more instructional. It's in the Florida Gulf Coast League. And that is for him to work on his hitting. And just a lot of things that need to be addressed, as you can obviously tell by the numbers. So that is where Jose Abreu is going to be as of Wednesday.
Yeah, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon, so it is prior to Tuesday night's game. But Dana Brown saying basically, quote, they want to get some at-bats for Abreu and his timing back right. Meanwhile, Joey Loperfido brings his paella and his 13 home runs to Houston. He's playing outfield with Chaz banged up. If you missed it, Chaz is not doing real well health-wise right now. In Sugarland, Loperfido struck out 1 out of every 4 plate appearances, Stephen, but if he can hit anywhere near his Sugarland 1,106 OPS, if I read that right.
1.106. Yep, you got it.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it. Certainly. And I know from what I've heard, at least, as the early part of the season progressed, he did seem to get better as far as the strikeout ratio. It was pretty alarming there at the beginning. It was either a home run or a strikeout. And he does have a left-handed bat. And, what's funny is Dana Brown said to him, because they're both from New Jersey, he said, make New Jersey proud. So no pressure, Joey. No pressure at all. Just come in, take over first base or, play the outfield every once in a while and hit a bunch of home runs. But, yeah, he's going to be making his debut on Tuesday. Of course, we're recording this before the game. He'll bat 7th in the lineup, play left field on Tuesday. And John Singleton, no, we still haven't gotten rid of John Singleton. He will be at first base batting 8th. So, I think as much as the fact that they were going to do something with Jose Abreu, but also the fact that Chaz is banged up, those two things, kind of accelerated the process of Joey being called up, because I'm pretty sure the plan was to at least wait until June and see how things were. But obviously, things are more of a dire need than the Astros thought they would be when the season started.
He's played first base in 7 of his 25 starts in Sugarland, which, it's not like they're really efforting hard to get him first base at bats at this point, but they did make sure to at least get him in almost a fourth of the games or so. He did play 63 games, Stephen, at first base his freshman year at Duke, but that's been a few years now.
It's been a while, and it's not like Major League first base. But I do think it's smart, Robert, that if they are going to give him time at first base, A, they're not going to just throw him out there on his debut. Let him at least play a position he's familiar with, and B, that he can just kind of seg into that, get some more practice, and not game practice, but practice. So I think it was smart that they're bringing him up, letting him play left field, since there is a need there at the moment, and batting him 7th in the lineup, so there's not a huge amount of pressure for him. I mean, you're certainly going to put him near the top of the order.
Yeah, the nickname that everybody seems to keep using is J-Lo or whatever. Joe
Cooks. Come on, Joe Cooks. It's already ingrained in, what is it, his Instagram page that he has? It's pretty easy.
Yeah, Joe Cooks, maybe Paella Power. I like Paella
Power. That's good too. Yeah, J-Lo, I mean, that's old.
Yeah, let's get rid of it. I'm tired of the one initial and the two things in the second word or whatever. Also this weekend, kind of a good weekend for the Astros. They played well in Mexico. Can the Astros play their home games in Mexico? It's the first time this year, Stephen, they look like the real Astros instead of some generic knockoff brand that, maybe came from a bad, Chinese shipped over stuff, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I'm wishing that we could just make Minute Maid Park like the Mexico Stadium that they were in and somehow simulate, the air conditions and all that kind of thing where the ball, will be hit out further. But then, of course, remember, our pitchers, they're going to give up home runs too. So I'm not sure how that would work, but man, something. I mean, look, the Colorado Rockies are not a good team, but you know what? It doesn't matter. The Astros need some kind of injection of confidence. And if it comes against a team that is about as bad as they are in conditions where, almost anybody could hit a home run, you and I could probably hit it, at least 300 feet in that ballpark, Robert, maybe, then take it. And we'll find out. They got a series with the Guardians coming up, and the Guardians are pretty tough. Their pitching's been really good this year. But, man, if the Astros could just string together some wins, more than 2 in a row, which, they've done before. I think they beat the Rangers 2 straight, but then they just went right back to where they were. So we just got to see if they can string out some more wins, get some confidence. And look, they're not that far out of first place. I mean, come on, as ridiculous as it may sound, they could take over the division, Robert, at some point if they just had a run going. And if the Rangers just, keep kind of going him and haw like they have been, I don't think the Astros would be able to make a wild card spot at this stage of the race, even though that's still early too. But it's not that far-fetched to think that the division is at least within their reach.
Yeah, it helped also this weekend that Framber looked pretty good in his return to the rotation. At least you have 2 aces now, and Framber and Verlander back on the mound.
Yeah, and of course, with Framber being a ground ball pitcher, even when he isn't at his best, he still gets those ground balls, and he didn't give up. There was only 1 home run that Colorado hit during that 2-game series. Therefore, the pitchers definitely bore down to give up as many home runs as we thought they would. But Framber, he didn't walk anybody, if I'm not mistaken, Robert. I don't think he had any walks. So he definitely looked better than I expected him to coming back from an injury like this. You just have to always wonder, once he's had that issue, are they going to have to be careful with him if he has it again? And Christian Javier hopefully will come back soon. So maybe the tide is starting to turn a little bit.
That's the thing you mentioned that we forget about. The Astros pitching staff has always been good with control the last few years. It's sort of an underrated problem that they've been having this year is the walks.
Yeah, boy, especially at the beginning of the season. What was it? The opening day game against the Yankees. Man, they had 9 walks, and Framber had, I think, 6 of them. So, you just don't want to walk a batter. Just too many bad things can happen when you walk a batter. Whether you're leading off an inning, whether you get 2 outs, and you're trying to get that 3rd out, it doesn't matter. So if they can cut down on the walks and get better at their control and just locate their pitches, JP France, we need to mention him. He got sent down to Sugar Land. Not really surprising about that because he just can't seem to find his control either.
Yeah, I mean, it's another interesting move that they made because, you thought, Spencer Getty might be the guy after, France pitched well all of last year, but France has been so bad. And Arrighetti not exactly rolling, but he looks better when you compare him to France, I guess.
Well, yeah, and he didn't pitch badly. In fact, he pitched in that first game of the Colorado series, and he was the one, he only gave up that 1 home run. And I think he only gave up 1 other run the rest of the game. He seems to look a little better each time out. And don't forget, he hadn't pitched that much in AAA. He pitched somewhat there last year. His ERA was a little bit high. He's still trying to figure things out. So I think they're probably going to be a little more patient with him. With France, here's the thing. JP France is who he is. I don't know that he's ever going to be any better than he has been, even when he's been at his best. His stuff it has to be on point, Robert. He's not electric. So he's got to work with finesse and he's got to have good command. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen for him.
Yeah, you want to talk about a starter that's doing his job? Let's go to Ronel Blanco. Look at what he's done over 5 starts. 1.65 ERA, 0.92 whip, 144 batting average against. Oh, yeah, a no-hitter. Forgot about that. 30 Ks and 14 walks. If somebody would have told me this a month ago, that Ronel Blanco's doing all this stuff, and the Astros are still a disaster, just a total disaster for a pitching staff, I'd say, what kind of nutcase are you? And get that fake time machine out of here.
Yeah, well, I don't think Dana Brown is surprised because, boy, he's been lauding him for the last couple of years. And by the way, I stand corrected. It was Ronel Blanco who pitched that first game of the Colorado series, so my mistake. So, he only gave up that 1 home run. So he looks good. Even when he gets in a little bit of trouble, he worked his way out of it and is just pitching dynamite. And, yeah, we're all a little surprised. I think that he's made the strides that he has, but I guess Dana Brown's not because, boy, he sure has been lauding him as the next big thing as a starter. And that's why, they worked on him last year, sending him to AAA to be a starter. Well, he's reaping the benefits right now. I mean, it's a long season, but you can't complain about the way he's pitched so far.
Unbelievable. Blanco is throwing Blancos. I mean, he's just throwing blanks out there. And Blanco means white. I know.
Yeah, I know. Blanks, blanc, whatever.
Yeah, just trying to work it a little bit. Last thing I thought we would hit on is the Dusty Baker effect. Stephen, there's a thing called the Dusty Baker effect.
Well, there is. And John Shea of the San Francisco Chronicle actually did a pretty neat article that the Houston Chronicle reprinted in Monday's edition. And Robert, we've talked about this before. Okay. I think when Dusty was hired and just about everywhere he's been hired, this comes up. Dusty Baker, he comes onto a team, takes a team, makes it better. And then as soon as he leaves, the team goes sour and doesn't make the playoffs. So, yeah, we've been pointing fingers at this player and that player and Dana Brown and maybe some of it at Espada and some of it at Framber and some of it at Bregman and so forth. They're not the reason the Astros are struggling, Robert. The big problem is the ghost of Dusty's past. Look, when he went to the Giants, they went from 72 wins to 103. Then he bolted after, they went to the 2000 World Series and lost. The Giants didn't win another playoff game until the championship era started, and that was in 2010. He goes from the Cubs. They go from 67 wins to 88 wins in his first year, reached their first NLCS since 1989. But the next playoff win, the 2016 World Series run, Dusty wasn't there. The Reds, 90-loss team when Dusty comes over. They make the playoffs 3 times in 4 years, but oops, they haven't won a playoff game since then. First season in Washington, they improved, 12-game improvement, won 95, 97 games. Well, Dusty left, and yeah, they'd win the World Series, but it was a little while after that. So there's your proof, Robert.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Either he gets out just when things are about to go bad as far as talent, guys are falling over the hill or whatever, or there's the other option of maybe Dusty knows what he's doing as a manager. Guys out there that hated on Dusty for the last few years.
Well, it may be a little of both. I mean, you think that, Dusty's a pretty smart guy. I mean, let's be straight. No matter what you think of him or his lineups or, how he makes his pitching moves and so forth, he's a smart guy. And maybe he just figures, I just need to be in a place for so long. And after that, it's going to get stale on both sides. Or in some cases, you can see that some things are kind of ebbing away. He and Dana Brown didn't exactly get along, and that played into it. But it is kind of ironic that every time he left a team, they went sour.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible story. And, I just wish him the best of luck and want to see more Dusty out there and doing stuff because he's a fun guy to keep an eye out on. And, I was watching what was going on this weekend, Stephen, on social media. And one of the things that happened this weekend, I don't know if you caught this, but the Rolling Stones were in Houston. And, I just think of this because Dusty's one of those guys that he knows everybody. So he probably knows Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger gets some shots around Houston. And I'm like, man, he was all around me. And I just must have missed it or whatever. I was in the wrong space, but he got his big photo in front of that huge, massive, like 2-story or whatever, however big it is, armadillo in front of the Armadillo Palace over by the Good Company.
Oh, man. Yeah. And, of course, I live in Austin and I haven't been in Houston. I lived in Houston before I moved here. It's been a long time since I've been there, Robert, and I've never been to that place. But I did hear about the Stones being in town there. And, with all the hobnobbing Dusty was doing with this celebrity and that celebrity and the other after the Astros won the World Series, I'm sure Mick's in his Rolodex somewhere.
Yeah. And of course, we need to get our pitchers to do the old, is it in the Rolling Stones that did Paint It Black?
Painted Black. Yep. That's it. Painted Black.
Yeah. I got to get them to do that a little bit more.
Absolutely. It would go a long way.
Well, hopefully we'll talk about some more Astros wins. I hope that it just doesn't end with the Mexico series, but looking forward to that. Looking forward to our Texans show tomorrow. I can't wait to.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, you guys are going to love that one. And we'll talk some Rockets here pretty soon. I need to get some Rockets people on the docket. But have a good one, everybody, and we'll talk to you again soon.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.